Greetings, fellow gamers. Yes, at long last, we finally have our first proper look at Grand Theft Auto 6. This time with Rockstar's approval, mostly. Considering how things went down with Red Dead turning into a live service hell, the sacred cash cow of 5 that has completely changed priorities, and departure of senior creative leads like Dan Houser and more recently Michael Unsworth, it seemed like the writing was on the wall for Rockstar. Obviously it's too early to say with 6, but it may very well be their last creatively ambitious single-player title before the inevitable online mode consumes everything. So, for a bit of fun, let's have a look at the story side of things. After all, people don't remember RDR2 for its battle pass. Intercut with scenes of Vice City, flexing asset density and what's easily the best engine in the industry, we're actually given a pretty good look at the characters and potential story missions. So let's break it down. This time, the story's reportedly centered around a Bonnie and Clyde dynamic between its two central characters. From the get-go, we see a shot of Lucia in prison, talking to some kind of counselor or advocate, with her shrugging off ending up there as bad luck. What's interesting is that between the world flavor shots of the trailer, we get a pretty clear setup for how things go down. So let's cut that together and have a look at it in order. That changes things, huh? Whether this will be the opening of the game, it's hard to say, but that would be rehashing the same idea as North Yankton in 5. Rockstar is very deliberate in their marketing, it's not like shots or lines end up here by chance. RDR2's teaser was Arthur telling John to run and not look back. In the launch trailer, John's first line was asking, "What about loyalty?" Two instances where it can't get more on the nose with the central themes. The only way we're going to get through this is by sticking together, being a team. Trust? Trust. That one word is going to play a huge role. As it stands, we have two options with how things are going to play out. First of which, the game starts in media res, similar to 5, with the pair breaking into what looks to be a petrol station or convenience store, likely towards the outskirts of Vice City for longer response times from the police. Things go sideways and Lucia ends up in prison, leading to that opening shot of the trailer from before. Second option, Lucia's already in prison at the start of the game, and what we see is the first steps in her getting back on her feet. The two of them need to make money, and they have one way to make that possible. This kicks off the whole ride or die dynamic between the two, that Lucia doesn't want to end up going back to prison, and she and Jason have to trust each other. It could even be that the counselor sessions bookend the first act of the game, that Lucia is recounting events as we jump back and forth in the timeline, and Rockstar wants to play with something less linear chronologically. But what about Jason? That's what I find most interesting about this dynamic, but we'll need to dive into this a bit deeper. In the key art released with the trailer, we see Lucia has an ankle bracelet on, essentially a monitoring device for those out on bail and the like. Jason, on the other hand, doesn't have one, at least as far as we can see. But I think this is a pretty clear decision on Rockstar's part. Jason wasn't in prison like Lucia, and either he's been waiting for her to get back out, or Lucia has come back into his life after some amount of time has passed, and they start to awkwardly reconnect. If we take another look at the key art again, we can see Lucia has her arm over Jason, as if pulling him into her embrace. Posture and composition is like character art 101, so I think we can glean a lot more from this image than it may appear at first. The love between the two is already implied, considering they've been likened to Bonnie and Clyde, but what would be even more interesting is if this relationship's more rocky than expected. Don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to simplify this, that Jason's a good, hard-working boy and Lucia comes crashing in to ruin his life. That would be incredibly cliched and morally black and white. No, what's more fascinating is that Jason could be more apprehensive as Lucia pushes further and further into their life of crime. What further supports this idea is if we take a look at the lyrics used in the trailer, taken from Love is a Long Road by Tom Petty. The opening is particularly telling. I won't play it here for obvious copyright reasons. There was a girl I knew, she said she cared about me, she tried to make my world the way she thought it should be. Yeah, we were desperate then to have each other and hold, but love is a long, long road. These lyrics are from Jason's perspective, which is why the trailer focuses solely on Lucia. Much like Scorsese, David Lynch, and countless directors before them, Rockstar is using music to convey character and theme. Love is a long road. If we look at the real-life Bonnie and Clyde, one that won't end well. Speaking of Scorsese, what we see of the two characters indicates a similar rise and character arc. Taking that robbery sequence from earlier again, Jason and Lucia are in what looks to be a fairly nondescript motel room, hardly the luxury seen in other parts of Vice City. They're dressed in everyday clothes as well, which, while hardly rags, aren't exactly flaunting wealth. Sure, you could argue these are disposable for the sake of the robbery, but it's likely the two are still in the early stages of their spree at this point, and desperately need the cash. To the point they're holding up a convenience store and not, say, a national bank. Contrast this with later in the trailer, the woman posing in sunglasses and a bikini is obviously Lucia if we compare the beauty spots on her face to the earlier model. Her hair is dyed at this point, indicating it may be some kind of infiltration mission, Lucia playing as the distraction or potentially casing out the joint and targets. Finally, we get this shot which reinforces that character dynamic from earlier. The two are now driving that good-looking sports car of some kind, with Lucia in a fancy dress and wildly celebrating. With this in mind, it's not going to be milk bars and newspaper stands forever, but with greater success comes greater attention. Much like the real-life Bonnie and Clyde, Jason and Lucia are obviously not okay with being poor trailer trash. They're not going to lay down and submit, law be damned. But the problem with those that reach the top is that there's only one way to go. Finally, before we wrap things up, I wanted to have a look at potential missions. While Vice City is no longer in the 80s, the drug trade would be bigger than ever. We see this shot of boats moving in through the harbour, likely a smuggling operation, one we may very well interrupt. As you may remember, that first teaser of 5 featured the pest control team used in the first heist. Another one that's less clear is this shot, late afternoon by the looks of it, of an airboat going through the marshes. Could be a side activity like hunting, but it's hard to make out whether Lucia is on the boat. Is it unrelated, just another world shot with the lighting tech on display? Is the person on the airboat one of the strangers and freaks characters we'll run into? A friend or acquaintance of the crew? Personally, I'd prefer to see the game focus more on just Jason and Lucia than a wider crew of contacts, even if that's also historically accurate. We already had the heist crews in 5, but who knows? Whether you're hyped, cautiously optimistic, or just indifferent, it's clear that Rockstar is going to make a ton of money, if nothing else. Of course, I could be way off the mark with some of these, but like I said at the start, it's just a bit of speculation for fun. And hey, guess we'll find out in 2 years' time. Let me know what you think, your interpretation or theories. I would like to think this is going to be another killer single-player campaign. The original RDR is one of my favourite games of all time, but Rockstar's changed, and the industry along with it. I just want to play good games, with good writing.